From the SAT number 9. This is the April 2017 QAS-US test. Okay, so question 35 says, in passage 2, Pendleton indicates that the phrase, "we the people," is something. So essentially what we need to do is figure out, how does Pendleton characterize the phrase, "we the people"? And that's pretty easy to scan for. That's going to be in the second paragraph here for passage 2, where he talks about we the people and what he thinks about it. And he says a number of things about it, all of which we should take note of. However, before we go any further, we should make sure that we have a good handle on both arguments for passage 1 and for passage 2, because passage 2 is not the only one that references this phrase, "we the people," because the author of passage 1 also references the phrase. And we need to understand why they're talking about this phrase, "we the people," and how it relates to their overall argument. And I find that with paired passages like this, they tend to be a little more general in terms of the amount of comprehension that you need, as opposed to the other passages, which tend to be more specific and sentence oriented. So I'm an advocate of getting a solid comprehension of the passages before you answer questions for any passage on the SAT. But particularly for these passages, they tend to function more at the level of the general argument, meaning that if you understand what passage 1 is arguing, the point he's making, and you understand what passage 2 is arguing and the point that they're making, you're usually able to eliminate and select answer choices more quickly and more accurately because they deal at this level of argument, as opposed to other questions where they deal more at the level of the sentence, and you got details in the sentence and details in the question. So just a general rule of thumb, we want to make sure that we know what passage 1 and passage 2 are talking about. So the basic argument for passage 1 is that he's opposed to the new Constitutional Convention and in favor of keeping the Articles of Confederation. He thinks that it's sufficient. And some of the arguments that he brings is he thinks that the level at which the government should be decided, or the level of authority, should be at the state level as opposed to the individual level. So one of the criticism that he makes is here: "I have the highest veneration for those gentlemen, but, sir, give me leave to demand, what right had they to say, 'we the people'? My political curiosity, exclusive of my anxious solicitude for the public welfare, leads me to ask, who authorized them to speak the language of 'we the people' instead of 'we the states'?" So his whole objection is that the members of the Constitutional Convention are saying "we the people." So they're acting as if they're representing the people as opposed to representing the states. And he actually thinks that, he says, states are the characteristics and soul of a confederation. So states should be the smallest element or unit for a confederation, not the individual people. So down here in passage 2, this is where "we the people" is brought up again. And so what the author of passage 2 says is, an objection to the form of the expression, "we the people," is thought improper. So he's saying, basically, Patrick Henry thinks that this is improper. Then he says, permit me to ask, or let me ask the gentleman who made this objection, who but the people can delegate powers? So he's sort of dismissing his objection by saying, who but the people can delegate powers? Who but the people have a right to form government? The expression is a common one and a favorite one with me. The representatives of the people by their authority is a mode wholly inessential. If the objection be that the Union ought to be not of the people but of the state governments, then I think the choice of the former very happy and proper. What have the state's governments to do with it? So passage 2 just simply takes the opposite stance from Patrick Henry in passage 1, and his whole thing is that this is actually appropriate. The people should be the level at which authority is granted. People should be the smallest element that form a confederation or form a constitution or form a government. He says, who but the people have that right? So if we're to answer this question, which says, what does Pendleton indicate about the phrase "we the people?" we should say his point is, 1, the objection to it is misplaced, the objection to it is wrong, and that he's actually in favor of it. He basically thinks it's an okay phrase, and he thinks that it represents a truth, and a truth that he believes in. So now we can look at the answer choices for 35, and we're going to look for either something that is dismissive towards objection or something that's positive towards the phrase. So A says that Pendleton indicates that the phrase is objectionable to most citizens. Now we have to be careful here because he begins by saying an objection is made to the form, the expression "we the people." So we might say, okay, yeah, there is an objection to that form, so let's choose A. However, A is saying that the phrase is objectionable to most citizens. And the objection that Pendleton is referring to here is not an objection made by the citizens, but it's an objection made by Henry in passage 1. And we could actually expect that most citizens will probably be in favor of the phrase. Even though the passage doesn't give us evidence, we could say that because most citizens are the people who are mentioned in the phrase, it would make sense that they wouldn't be they wouldn't object to the phrase. So A is not a good answer choice, and we can eliminate A. Answer choice B says that the phrase is appropriate for the proposed type of government. And this is a very simple answer choice. It has that general quality of a good SAT answer choice that we like, meaning that it's pretty general, it's sort of bleached of the concrete content, and it's just basically saying that Pendleton thinks it's an okay phrase. Very simple, it's not saying too much, so this is a good answer choice for the question. C says that the phrase is popular among proponents of states' rights, and this is again another place where we need to make sure we're tracking arguments for both passage 1 and passage 2. So is this phrase popular among proponents of states' rights? Well, if we remember, Pendleton is more in favor of the individual rights, and Henry in passage 1 is more in favor of states' rights. And so these are sort of pitted against each other. So the phrase "we the people" is basically saying that it should be people who are deciding, the individual, the citizens who are deciding how the government is formed, not individual states. So this phrase would actually be contrary to proponents of states' rights, so not likely to be popular among them. So we should eliminate C as well. Answer choice D says that the phrase is overused by supporters of a federal system. And this is a pretty strong answer choice because it's making this qualitative judgment by saying it's overused by supporters of a federal system. And basically, in none of the passages that we looked at and in that text, in that second paragraph we looked at, nowhere is it remarked that this phrase is being overused. There's sort of other judgments and other opinions made about it, but nowhere is it talking about being overused. Because this is a strong claim, we need strong evidence to back it up, and the evidence just simply isn't there. So we can eliminate D, and that's going to leave us with answer choice B for our correct answer for question 35.